welcome back to another episode of the DailyFlip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're flipping through a story talking about a secret provision put into the big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump wants to put through and how it may actually give him some powers that even Republicans and Democrats would not be okay with. And of course, we will end today with our Daily Delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive and ready to take on the day. Now, with that said, let's jump into our daily debate. Should the president be able to unilaterally decide whether or not a group can have nonprofit status, whether it be a university, whether it be a nonprofit? I know that sounds weird, but can he go in and say, we're going to strip you of your nonprofit status and you're going to be taxed like a corporation? Should that be an executive power? And I want your perspective from, should the executive have that power, or also does the executive have the right to do that, how things are structured currently? Because I think those are two different arguments. I had a conversation with somebody about it today. But with that, let's jump into the actual article that comes from our friends over at alternate.org. And I say friends slightly, but still. They bring up a good point, and you don't always agree with everything they say, but you still have to take what they're saying seriously because they bring up a good point. Now, let's jump in to the first quote that actually matters. The first part sets it up saying that governments are inherently moral, and I don't actually agree with that, but no government doesn't inherently have to be a moral organization, though one that protects your personal property rights is, I think in this case, they make too broad of an assertion. They're assuming that all governments are moral because from our perspective, our government was actually more protecting our natural rights, and then they kind of went into a subjectivist view, projecting it on other places, but that's not necessarily here nor there. Let's jump into the article that actually matters. Quote, Republicans in the House of Representatives just inserted into their must-pass big, beautiful, multi-trillion-dollar tax break for billionaires legislation a provision that would enable the president to designate any nonprofit, from Harvard to the American Civil Liberties Union to your local Democratic Party, a, quote, terrorist supporting organization that then loses their tax exemption status, effectively putting them out of business. And the quote goes on, and then who decides who gets the designation? The president. And he gets to do it in secret, end quote. This is something that should terrify anybody who's afraid of executive power, whether it be Democrat, whether it be Republican. Democrats obviously don't want to hand over this power to someone like Donald Trump, but I think Republicans would be wary to trust it with somebody like Barack Obama, who actively tried to do this and come after nonprofits during his tenure in office, during his second term in office, and a little bit during the first term, but most of the credible ones that we saw were attempts during the second term. So why would this be okay? Why should we allow a president to basically have this unadulterated power to categorize people as terrorist supporting organizations and then cut their funding? I could understand from a national security perspective if you're trying to create a loophole that makes it easier to address these sort of issues. But one, if you want to give the president this sort of power, it's a drastic overreach, just being able to simply designate anything he wants as a terrorist supporting organization and therefore strip funding from them without any sort of judicial process. But two, is this even the proper way to do it? Rather than having a audit through the IRS, having an executive simply use his authority to put them into a special category and send them into basically a behind-the-scenes trial is how Alternate is categorizing here. I think it's a little unfair, but if we are to take their framing as is, that is extremely, extremely scary. It's like a FISA ruling in a FISA court. You don't necessarily hear anything about it. It's completely under covers and under wraps, and that's definitely not what you want your government to be doing. Things in secret, things under covers, things under wraps. So with that, let's talk about the principle of it. Should the executive have this power in general? No. In my opinion, in the principle of the matter, to actually be within constitutional bounds, the president shouldn't even be addressing these sort of things. Taxes should be appropriated by the Congress and the Senate, and not through an organization that they allow the executive to create and then have oversight over. They should directly be the ones doing it, and therefore anything that would actually be able to affect their tax status should be something that is left to the Congress and the Senate. But the Congress and the Senate are actually abdicating a lot of their power. Well, they've not now. Oh, magically now they've always been abdicating a lot of their power because they don't necessarily want to deal with the repercussions of their actions. So they give the power to the president and let the president be the one that takes it on because they can say that they have a popular mandate because they were elected again. Now, let's go even more grand scheme. For the people who are out there saying, actually, no, Alex, you may be right about the fact that they can't necessarily do this to any tax status. And what I mean is they can't do this to any group that is a nonprofit tax status and just come in and say you can't get your funding. The way that they're getting around it, Mr. Alex, smart Alex over there, is that they're using the terrorist supporting organization dedication, which is something that would fall under more of a national security or foreign policy sort of. And I think you could stretch it for foreign policy. You could say that those two powers that the executive has to designate the foreign policy and deal with national security issues, those are something that the president can directly deal with, and therefore it's okay. And I think you could make a strong argument in that direction, especially because you need the person or branch of the government that is able to deal with national security issues, especially ones posed from outside forces, to be able to act almost unilaterally. I say almost, be able to act quickly and effectively in order to quash those threats to the American people. And that is where Congress normally doesn't work. They don't work quickly. They notoriously work slowly when they were actually working towards bills in unison rather than in simply being a partisan game that gets constantly slowed down every 2 years. But does that mean, in principle, that they should have those powers in the first place? No. They should have never been given the power to actually use the IRS as an agency in order to reap the taxes from the people. They shouldn't have such vested control over the designations that we use domestically rather than internationally, because on the international front, you need a strong unitary executive that can present a united front against the rest of the world. But that means that we have to give more power back to the Senate and the House. And guess what? That means we're not going to get anywhere. So my question again rises, does this scare you? Would you be okay with your favorite nonprofit who may be saying things that, if you're a Republican right now, you have a favorite nonprofit that is supporting mothers who are possibly not going to go to an abortion clinic and are going to try to raise their child. They're trying to get resources from these different organizations. Or maybe you're a Democrat and you really like what XYZ the Roosevelt Institute is the one that comes to mind. What the Roosevelt is doing and training the next generation of Democratic activists. Are you okay with giving this power over to a president? And the question will probably be divided along two lines, which is the idiotic part. We're going to go beyond just this simple story, and we're going to return to an overall theme that we have talked about multiple times on this channel, which is, are you okay with the power being used by your side but not by the other side? At that point, you're not principled. At that point, you're not actually saying that is a bad thing. You're just saying it would be a bad power because it would be wielded against us. And you should not be in politics. In my opinion, you can play the power game all you want, and politics is a power game. I'm not trying to deny that that is what it has become. But if you actually care about the good of this nation, if you actually care about upholding some rules or principles, if you actually care about limiting the misuse of the power of government, and that can go apply to either side. That can apply to the left and the right. I didn't say the limited amount of government. I didn't really frame it in a right-wing way. I didn't frame it in a just, you have to be just about the use of power. That would be in a Democrat way. If you want to approach it from both sides, which is limiting the improper, and possibly even, if you want to use these authors' perspective here at the beginning, a moral use of government, this is something that we can unite behind on. This is something that we can say, no, the president should not be able to do this. No, the president should not be able to unilaterally strip these agencies and these nonprofits of their tax status and essentially cripple them. Because guess what? Places like the Roosevelt Institute are putting up money in order to push back against Donald Trump's agenda. Guess Donald Trump's not going to like that, but in years to come, they're going to be supporting the Democrats. So would you really want them out of there now? No, of course the Democrats will push back against it now. And maybe other organizations like the Heritage Foundation are actively supporting the Trump's agenda. They're consulting with them. But guess what? If you open up the door and say, well, we can get rid of Roosevelt Institute's tax status this time and Heritage will be fine because they're our boys, when the next presidency comes in, they're going to say, oh, okay, hey, yeah, now that I have this power, this precedent has been set, we're going to get rid of the Heritage Institute. We're going to say the Heritage Foundation, we are going to say that they are promoting terrorist activities or terror supporting activities, which could be easy if the FBI continues on its route of claiming that they need to do investigations in different Catholic churches because they could be seen as domestic terrorists. So it would actually be easier than you think, considering Heritage has a lot of alignment with the classical Catholic beliefs, and not all of them, of course, but a lot of them. So do you want to open that door? Do you want to open the door to essentially shutting down all of the nonprofit sphere that is political in nature? And I think, honestly, you could make an argument that's a good thing, that is extra money flowing into the system that is limiting the amount of jobs that people can get, that people have to get in the free market because they can be politics adjacent. But to pretend as though these organizations don't do good at all, that they don't provide trainings for how to effectively use the government in order to serve constituencies or how to win elections. And if you're a person who thinks that elections have the ability to change the course of this nation and therefore can provide a better path with the person that you're supporting because they're providing you with the information to become more effective at electing those people doing work on the ground, then I think you could say that they're an overall net good. And even if you don't agree that one side is a net good because it boosts the other side's ability to engage effectively, you could still say overall the institutions are a net good because they are increasing the political effectiveness of people. They're increasing the political buy-in from the amount of people that they're able to touch on the ground or through outreach efforts. So I think it would be a net loss if Donald Trump was to simply get rid of different organizations and designate them as terrorist supporters in order to strip them of their funding and open the door to the exact same thing happening on the other side of the aisle. But you know what? That's enough for me on that one. Let's do something that we were waiting for here for a little bit. We're going to jump back to our daily delight. And this one comes from our friends over at the Daily Bunny. I think we may have had a similar one before, but this is two bunnies snuggling up on a couch, interacting with one another. They kind of look like brothers. They're vibing, they're chilling, they're looking at mom like, what are you taking videos of us for? Hey, calm down, stop that. Why are you doing that? It's honestly a cute photo. And after the heavy stuff that we talked about today, if you want to leave with a smile on your face, go read that article. The link will be in the description below, the like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, where I post links to these episodes on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, as well as the link to 6 and 6, which is 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less, international news that comes out on Tuesday and Thursday. So, with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.